I realized I made a mistake in my previous videos, so today's curiosity is... It is very hard to understand what things are if you've never been formally introduced to them. Botanical drawings can be very pretty, but not very useful if you don't know the terminology for it. So, let's take a look at some of the details of a flower a bit closer. Flowers are likely the most recognized part of a plant, but identification comes from the very minute features of it. The most common structures include the corolla, the calyx, the carpel or pistil, the stamens, the receptacle, the bracts, and the pedestal. A few of these are more simpler than they sound. For example, the corolla is just a collective of petals on a single flower, while the calyx are the sepals. Some flowers only have one structure, with the sepals and petals being blended into one, and those are called tepals. You would still call a collection of tepals a corolla since they are effectively just petals. The pistil and stamens are the sexual organs that are in the center of the flower that make the nectar and the pollen. Many flowers have both a pistil and a stamen structure, but some plant families separate these features into different florets, or only produce one type, making the plant gendered. Flowers that only produce stamens are easily called stamenates, while flowers that have carpels are called pistillate. Plants like gooseberries and kiwis are like this, which is why you need to have both a male and a female for fruit to be produced. Additionally, these flowers that only make one of the organs instead of both are called imperfect since they lack one of the features that could exist in the total structure. You may have asked yourself,
how can I tell which one is male and which one is female?
And that's a very good question. The answer is it's all in the ovaries. Plants have ovaries just like animals, and the ovaries are kept at the base of the pistils. The pistils are made of 4 parts: the stigma at the top, the style, the ovaries, and the ovules on the inside. The male parts, as you may have guessed at this point, are the stamens, which are made up of only 2 parts, the long filament at the bottom and the pollen-bearing anther at the top. Classification and identification of these plants are often based around those major features. The number of petals, anthers, pistils can tell you a lot about a plant, but you also need to look at the placement of the ovary compared to the receptacle or pedestal. The number of locules in an ovary can also narrow it down. I should probably explain locules too. The ovules in an ovary can be arranged in many ways and are often formed in open areas that are separated by fleshy bits. For example, if you open up a tomato, you'll see the separate chambers where the seeds are. The seeds, in this case, are the ovules, and those chambers are the separate locules. These locule chambers are formed from the fusion of the carpel when it is compounded in the same structure and attached in the same style. Remember, the style being one of the major features within the female organ. Okay, so that was a lot to get out there all at once. I mean, I was looking at my notes and almost lost my mind too. So there's a lot more terminology to go through, so I might make a part 2. Anyways, the placement of the ovary is key to identification too. It can be under the corolla, remember that's the collection of petals, or above the corolla. If it is under, it is referred to as inferior and called epigynous. If it is above, it is referred to as superior, and there are 2 other ways of defining this. Most flowers you come across are going to be hypogynous, but some flowers have a structure called a hypanthium, and these flowers are called porogynous. It is very hard to tell the difference between these 2 different superior types of flowers often, so I hate them and refuse to talk about them any further. The locules are a bit easier, at least for me. The locules are only separated in 2 categories, the axial and parietal. Axial have ovules in the center, while the parietal are attached to the outer wall and often lack that fleshy center structure. Going back to the tomato, this will be an axial locule since the structure has a center partition. When the pistils have not fused together and each have only one locule, the flower is termed apocarpous, but even I forgot this, so it's probably fine if you did too. The last part of my notes that I'm willing to cover before I go absolutely and utterly insane are the flower shapes themselves. Just like in animals, again, flowers can have both radial or bilateral symmetry, but unlike animals, they have weird terms that make it slightly more complicated to remember. Radial flowers are called actinomorphic. Think of sunflowers and roses, while bilateral flowers are called zygomorphic. So think of pansies and orchids when you hear the word zygomorphic. Lastly, multiple flowers can form together in different shapes. You don't often find just one flower, but when you do, this shape is called solitary. When they form together, it's called an inflorescence or a floret. When they form in a neat little spiral thing, it's called a chyme. And when they reach straight up and have alternating blooming flowers, it's called a spike. When it branches out repeatedly, it's called a panicle. And when the sprouts out come in an upside down umbrella shape, it's called an umbel. When the umbrella shape has multiple other branches within it, it's just called a compound umbel. From far away, you can narrow down quite a bit by just looking at the shape of the inflorescences. But without getting close, you still wouldn't be able to tell which plants are gonna kill you when you touch them, where others can go into your garden. Oftentimes, they look like the same goddamn flower. Okay, so that is all that my soul can handle at the moment, but these terms should clarify at least half of what I say all the time in my videos. The rest will have to come in a different video, being all about leaves, because that's a whole nother issue to cover. Anyways, see you next time. Thanks for watching.